A boundary is not control, it's clarity. A boundary is not even a demand, it's actually discipline. A lot of times people conflate, having standards, having a boundary versus demands and having these glorified expectations. And that comes from something. A lot of times it comes from our childhood where everything was kind of punitive, where there were demands placed on you to do certain things versus there just being boundaries, right? Cause and effect. And I know, like, with the talk around boundaries and everybody having them and no being a complete sentence, or I don't have to show up, that's my boundary, it can start to become a little manipulative, right? Where this is no longer boundaries being placed. Instead, it's controlling the dynamic of how a relationship works on your terms, not for both people. See, when you have healthy boundaries, naturally you will have healthier relationships because you're saying to the person, hey, this is the cost of entry for both of us to exist in a very functional and healthy way. I don't grow resentful of you, and you are not unaware, and I'm not mistreating you, okay? And you know the parameters of how we move. The wellness community has allowed a lot more space for words, but not the work. People hear a word and they latch onto it versus understanding what is the actual work. Boundaries are not manipulative or controlling. Okay, a prime example, I'll give you two. So when it comes to the work that I do with my clients, one of the things I tell them is when it comes to reaching me, there's usually a 24 to 48 hour period that I will respond to you. I'm usually with other clients, I'm responding to messages, but usually a 24 to 48 hour window. Also, I don't work on weekends. That's my boundary, okay? So if a client chooses to email me and they understand that, hey, Isaiah will get back to me within 24 to 48 hours, or if they choose to email me on the weekend and I see that email, well, I established a boundary. I'm not going to respond to that email. Well, this is an emergency, but very rarely. Okay, because I gave them the parameters. Now, if they overstep that, that's on them. If I overstep it, that is on me. See, when we actually talk about true boundaries, it requires your participation more than the other person. Okay, another example, or something that's perceived as a boundary, but is actually a form of manipulation and controlling the dynamics. Let's say two friends. One friend is like, hey, communication is important to me, and consistency, effort. Sometimes I realize I reach out to you and you probably don't get back to me until a week later. And a person goes, yeah, I don't have to be on my phone. I don't have to respond to you. That's my boundary. And the other friend goes, well, okay, so how do we navigate this friendship then? Well, that's my boundary. You're not respecting it. Okay, I don't have to be on my phone if I don't want to be on my phone. I don't have to if I don't want to respond to you. I don't have to. That is my boundary. So the friend goes finally, all right, cool. So clearly we have different viewpoints and value systems in terms of what friendship looks like. With that being said, I'm going to step away, right? And then this other person gets upset. Oh, you're not respecting my boundaries. You're being selfish. That's control. Because you never gave this person the honest opportunity or clarity about what are the terms of endearment, or what's the cost of entry for us to, communicate. A boundary would sound like, hey, yeah, I'm not on my phone all day, but I'll usually make it a point to respond at night after work. That's when I have time, so I'll respond to you then. Is that cool, right? That is engagement now. I'm creating a space for both of us to exist in a healthy way where I'm not becoming resentful, you're not feeling displaced or ignored or disregarded or disrespected. That's a boundary, okay? That person knows that, hey, if I text this person, I probably won't hear from them until nighttime. Now, if the other person says this is my boundary and they step out of that, and now they create this expectation, and now they're upset that the person is expecting them to respond a little bit sooner, well, they didn't adhere to their own boundary. Terms and conditions, right? And when it comes to standards, right, we've talked about this. A lot of people think that they have standards, but in reality, it's just expectations. If you cannot meet your own standards, they are not standards because you don't stand on those principles. And standards and ultimatums are very different because a standard doesn't say that, hey, you have to participate or there's going to be dire consequences. If you're not going to be my friend, well, there's going to be consequences. You're going to pay for that, right? That's not a standard. And even if people don't outright say that, that is the undertone of how some people move, right? If you don't accept or tolerate my negligence in terms of me communicating with you, when I get back to you, when I respond, well, you're not a good friend anyway, right? That's not a standard. And if another person says, hey, if you don't respond when I want you to, well, I'm not dealing with you. I'm cutting you off. That's not a standard. A standard just says, hey, look, communication, consistency, consideration is important. It's important for me to receive, but it's also important for me to make sure I am providing. That's a standard, and I can stand on that, right? You'll notice the difference between a person who actually lives up to their standards and a person that just goes around demanding things from other people or thinking that they're the center of everybody else's world. And you can just see in how they move, what their discipline is. And people who treat themselves well, honestly, naturally treat other people well, right? You have a lot of people out here who say that they're practicing self-care or they're doing the inner work and, you know, they're so enlightened, and they are some of the most careless and insufferable people that you'll come across, right? There's a certain level of arrogance, there's emotional manipulation, there's entitlement, okay? There's gaslighting, you know, and they are never at fault because it's always this other person's problem. That's a you issue, not me. I'm protecting my peace. Protecting your peace is not avoiding people that you have created problems for. Protecting your peace is not avoiding people who you owe an apology to. Protecting your peace is not you acknowledging or not acknowledging the fact that you've been a little negligent in this relationship and the other person has noticed. That's not protecting your peace at all. But we could go around telling other people that this person's been the issue. Okay? The reason why we get standards and ultimatums so confused is because even growing up, there was punishment if we didn't do a certain thing, right? There was more of an authority there. And depending on the severity of the punishment, we've learned that, oh, this is the standard. But that's not the case, right? When a person genuinely has standards, they're not telling you that you have to participate. They're just saying, hey, that this is the cost of entry. You go to a restaurant, hey, there's a dress code, these are the prices, this is the food that we serve. We're not saying that you have to dine here. We're just saying this is what we offer. And the funny thing is we will argue in our interpersonal relationships about people having standards more than we'll argue about a job having certain standards, right? We will contort ourselves to work at a job or a conglomerate or be at a spot where the standards are there and we don't question them. But when it comes to interpersonal relationships where we literally affect each other's body chemistry, mentally, emotionally, and physically, we affect each other on a very molecular level. We think that people are not supposed to have standards about the relationships that they exist in. What? You know? A boundary is a contract that says, hey, if A doesn't happen and B does, then here's the outcome, C, the consequences. A boundary doesn't say, hey, don't talk to me like that, or you can't talk to me like that. That's a demand being placed on somebody else. Boundary says, hey, look, if every time we talk, you continue to treat me this way, I'm going to take a step away, or I'm not going to participate in this relationship anymore. So what happens after that? If the person continues, well, now this person says, well, I established a boundary. I see it's not happening, so I'm going to take a step away. I'm going to do something about it. It's not, hey, I told you you can't talk to me like that. Change. Okay? When we genuinely have standards, we can stand on those principles comfortably. And we're not requiring other people to do better than what we're willing to. That's a true marker of a standard. It's consistency, it's commitment, it's respect. but there are no demands placed. I'm saying, hey, this is what's required to exist in my life. I'm not saying that you have to be here. So if it feels like pressure, hey, there are other places to go. So I want you to think about it in terms of your own life. Do you operate from a place of genuine standards, or are you creating unspoken ultimatums for people? Are you trying to control your relationships? Okay. What changes or uncomfortable changes are you willing to make when it comes to yourself? Because that's the true marker of if you're doing the real work. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other.